Hey, Bude and Sara, thank you for coming in today. You are definitely stars out of Southeast Asia, but now you're reside in North America and you're just doing amazing work. You have become so highly recommended. You have such great science backgrounds as well, both of you, great experience in all the fundamentals of science, including Sara, you have a PhD in science-related areas, and Bude, you have all of this engineering expertise. And so thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
Thank you, Stephen, for inviting us.
So one of the things that my audience is always curious about is, what are the major inflection points in your life that made you this wonderful person you are today? And this could be when you were very young, or it could be when you're in school, could have been a mentor, it could be something in your career. For example, Bude, it could be when you were doing engineering, or it could be something that happened in the family. And Sara, you've got this amazing background in nuclear engineering. It could be when you're going in and getting your PhD or something like that, but it could be whatever, right? So I'll start with you first, Bude. Some people call you a genius because you got so much capability. So what are those magic inflection points in your life? And then after you, then I'll go to Sara.
Yeah, so starting with, since I was little, I always had interest in science and physics, and I got into computer very early, around 12 years old. At that time, it was still, like DOS, and I was learning all of these command lines in the university where my dad teaches mathematics. So we got access to internet very early at that time. And so, yeah, my interest was always in computer, and that's why I, pursue my degree in computer engineering and finally come to Canada because I'm super interested to see the world. And I saw that in Canada, there's the way of teaching very hands-on. And that just excites me, the way that I can just, put things together, code things, see how robots work. Eventually, I got interested in a lot of the biomedical world. And so when I was in Canada, I went to specialize in biomedical computer engineering. And that was what I thought would be my career since that time. But eventually, life led me into different path. I worked in the research of biomedical engineer, where I developed the simulation of the muscle signals to help control the prosthetics arm. But eventually, when I moved to Europe, because I met my husband, moved into other areas using my computer engineering background in statistics, and got to see the world, finance, manufacturing. But all in all, it all boils down to the same thing. It's the data. And now I'm pursuing my own startup, which is I'm trying to change the world on how people eat using the data.
That's a marvelous background, Bude, and I have to apologize. What happens is the hearing device I use, it pinged, but somebody was direct messaging me, so I missed maybe about 30 seconds. But what I heard is that you had this really early interest in technology, even from the age of 12, and your dad's a mathematician, and that really spurred your interest to innovation and to experiment and from engineering to biomedical engineering and working in prosthetics arms and so on. What really surprised me, though, you said you worked with DOS, so you seem very youthful. And DOS is like circa late 1970s or early 1980s. So.
Well, in Thailand, maybe, technology came a little bit later, but I'm born in 80s. So I did get the feeling of the DOS and early internet with Netscape and IRC and Pine. At that time, it was Pine, so we could search a whole faculty emails on on the Unix and go into the Pines and read emails from everyone. Like I was like early hacker during that time.
Right. So I can see that aspect. So now you're a hacker in residence with Tastermonial, your startup, right?
Exactly. Hacking my own body and hacking people's body to find the truth.
In a good way, though, for good
In a
things,
good
right?
way, yeah. So there's a lot of, insurance company taking this information for other purpose, but we're trying to change that mindset, and that's why we were able to convince a lot of people to take this journey with us and donate their data so that we can learn a little bit better how our body works and how we can be healthier.
So that's great. I mean, I can see this journey, and you speak what I think it's 5 languages. I think so. It's pretty amazing. Okay, now Sara, you also have an amazing background, and at the end of your description, I'll ask both of you how you got to know each other. But first of all, Sara, what are those inflection points in your life?
I think my dad influenced me a lot, and I don't know why. I always like to read, and I always like to know a lot of things in the world. When I was young, my dad used to call me a mobile encyclopedia, because whatever he doesn't know, he will ask me. I like to read a lot about many things in the world. But growing up in Thai society, we very much emphasize on education. So my dad always push me toward more science and technologies. Either I should be a doctor or engineer. Those are the kind of things that we do in the 70s, 80s. So because my dad was a civil engineer, so I also want to be an engineer, but I became a chemical engineer. But because I always want to see the world as well, so I really want to go abroad. And it happened that I got a scholarship from a University of New Brunswick in Canada to do my master and PhD in nuclear engineer. Like, it's actually chemical engineer, but a research is funded by a nuclear power plant. So I have to solve their corrosion problem. So that's how I get into nuclear area, and I do a lot of computational fluid dynamics. So we have to, of course, use a superpower computer to solve these fundamental problems. And then after that, I went and worked. And then at one point, I feel really depressed with life and things that going on. So I decided to look into, am I want to be in this career or I want to change? So I decided to change to pivot into finance. So I start to go back to university again and learn finance for 2 years. I came out and organized my portfolio and start to teach people how to manage their finance and put the cost in together to actually make an individual and family able to manage their finance. And then through those journey, I met with my partner right now that I run another company called Pillow Investment. So we help people manage their portfolio, because I believe that in our society, anybody can do what they love if they put their finance in places, because we still living in a capitalism society. So I believe the knowledge and the skill in finance will help free people, and they can do what they love. Because I guess my reflection point is, I did not realize that I did not enjoy being a nuclear engineer so much, but I was trapped because of the money. So I feel like I want to free myself. Then I realized to free myself, I have to understand finance. So I trying to do the same thing for other people. And through those journey, then I come to work with Bude and Tastermonial.
You know, it's quite fascinating. Again, your family, as with Bude, influenced your decision to get into sciences and all the way to getting a PhD in the sciences, and then using computational capabilities and nanocarbon hydrogen technology Generation 4 of the Canadian nuclear energy.
Yes.
And all of that, you have to model things using computing. So so you'd be an avid computing engineer in essence as well, just by necessity, right? Because computers
Yes.
are just part of everything today. So I guess the next thing is there's this conjunction that occurred between the two of you. How did you meet, and then how did you come together with Tastermonial? And then we'll get into more about details about Tastermonial. So
Yeah, so we met. Oh, sorry, Pippon, can you?
Yeah,
I
can say that because so Bude have a very fascinating background. Just like I say, I always tell people she's a borderline genius, but you won't feel that way because she's really easygoing, down to earth. So in New Brunswick, actually, where I was doing my PhD, Bude master at that time, Bude came for undergrad, and because of her family name, it kind of triggered me. This is really familiar because I have a dictionary that I love. And I feel like the author is one of the best author to write Thai dictionary I find. So I have it, my first dictionary, use my own money, very proud of it. And she has the same family name as the author. So I asked her and she said, oh, that's my grandfather. And her grandfather have a very interesting background as well. And then for her, she was undergrad and then she go and do her co-op in Sweden, and she come back, she speaks Swedish. And I just feel like this girl is really smart and really friendly and just fun. So we just build on the relationship from that point on. And later on, we go separate way. And a couple years ago, like 2-3 years ago, Bude contact me and she said she found her company, Tastermonial, is about a food platform. And I'm always interested in food as a medicine anyway. So then we start to talk and she asked me if I want to help her with looking for investors. So I like, yeah, I would want to participate in anything she do. Just because she's a great person and very, very smart. I believe in her ability. So that from my side.
Yeah, so from my side, yeah, we met in University of New Brunswick, and Sara, or I called her Pippon in Thai, she's always be my mentor. She was my mentor at that time, and through work, through, education, through just a life. And, when I had issues with money because I was so poor, I don't have money to pay for everything. And then, I did had some financial situations where my mom could not send me money to complete, to pay for the tuition. And so she gave me some guidance, and she's like, go out and apply for a part-time job. And she was helping me everything, to get my life straight there. So yeah, she's always been my mentor. So I reached back to her when I start my company, and I'm like, can you help me? You're in finance. So we got reconnected after a long period of time.
I mean, that's really fascinating, Bude. Your grandfather wrote the first dictionary, right? Something like that.
Yeah, he's a real entrepreneur. So he was the one who he didn't come from the really rich family, but he got a scholarship to go study in the UK when he was little. When he came back, he got into politics. He's a journalist like you. He's in journalism, and so he was helping, changing the Thai political landscape at that time, and got in trouble, got put into jail with all the political prisoner at that time. And that's where during 10 years, he actually wrote the dictionary on the island, because, in that old time, all the political prisoners were sent to the islands in Thailand, where today those islands become the tourist islands. But in the old days, it's surrounded by sharks. It's really, it's a lot of people died from malaria and all those things in the old days.
Sort of remarkable history, because this interview goes globally, so I guess we have to be respectful of every point of view as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's fascinating. You both come together. You both have a common interest in finance, but in doing something that's good for the world. And also you have a interest in science. You both come from deep science backgrounds. And you have something called grit. Grit is this idea that you work hard and you have skills and you just continue to work hard. And you're applying that talent you both have to developing these skills. You're optimizing for that. So, Bude, you come up with this idea of tastermonial. So what is tastermonial? How would you encapsulate what it is?
Yeah, so Tastermonial is basically, I mean, the name say for itself is, you know, we want people to be healthier through foods because we believe food is medicine. But when you look at the name Tastermonial, to really consistently apply a healthier eating, it's not just about numbers. It's not just about counting calories because you can't, you're human. You still have the pleasure side. So Tastermonial comes in to ensure that individual who's different, you know, can eat healthy in the long term with all the tools. We provide all the tools that he can have. And that means also providing recommendation and giving people choices that can match with what they like. So Tastermonial comes in as a way to provide testimonials on food, on different products, so that people can help the industry also. You know, there's a lot of products that are better than the big food, what big foods are doing. So it's a collaboration between the food, supplement, nutrition industry and consumers, bring them together, bridge that gap, and so that we could promote the healthier options and we can navigate them to the right audience. So people who might like this product could match, could see them and could try them. And once they like it and their body likes it by seeing, okay, their body reacts well to it, then of course there's a match so that it's a win-win. So the industry also move towards a healthier options and the consumer finds what they could, you know, what the list of products that match them from preference, from health side on the long term, so they can continue eating healthy for the rest of their lives.
So that's, you know, really, really fascinating. So what you're telling me is that you have a system where you engage the community. So it's community-based as well. Mm-hmm. And that community will test products from different sources and they'll give their evaluation of it. And you have some kind of sensing mechanisms that can be used or tools that can be used so you can get some data to back up what the nutritional benefits of it are. And so this helps the community because the communities are helping each other, but it's also helping the companies that are providing food products, nutritional supplements, and so on. And because they get feedback of what's working and what's not. And in that way, it can lead to a healthier lifestyle. So let's say, for example, I've got a particular kind of health condition, understanding how that nutrition I'm involved with, how to influence this, my lifestyle or how I am, getting that information will allow me to have a healthier lifestyle. So now the question to Sara, let's say I'm a person out there and I'm interested in working with a community of like-minded people to test products, give feedback on the products, have some monitoring done of me, which I agree to, and that data can be anonymized and then provided to help find what are the best products and what are the best benefits and so on. What does that look like as a person who just somehow finds out about you somehow? How do they get on board? What does that look like? What tools do they get? How do they submit that stuff? What kind of feedback do they get? How do they interact with others? How do they interact with different nutrient suppliers and food companies? What does that feel like for an individual out there in the marketplace?
That's for my question, right?
Yeah, I was going to, for Sara.
For Sara.
Oh, for me. So if a person want to onboard testimonial, they can subscribe in a testimonial website, right, Bud? And then they would get the kit, and then they would
So what's in the
download
kit?
app.
Okay, so what's in the kit?
Would you?
Yeah, I know better the product than Sara. She's advising me on the financial side, so I can speak for that. So people, first of all, people are aware of us because they are already wanted to change their diet. They already have this motivation to get healthier, and they know that food is one of the way that can get them there. So we're not changing the motivation. So we're already working with people motivated. These people found us through nutritionists, right? Dietitian nutritionists that we work with in our affiliate network. They come to us and they get those tools, which is a wellness experiment kit. So what is inside a wellness experiment kit is one of the key device that we use to help people learn what are the foods that are good for them is to measure the glycemic impact of food or the blood sugar response. And we provide, as a first tool, is a continuous glucose monitor that they can track for 14 days. And we give them the different instructions, which is basically a guide, an online guide, where they QR code and they walk through how to test different foods. So what's different, between us and other testing company is that we work directly with the supplier of food and supplement. So we actually give them a kit for experimenting with their bodies. And they use our app. They're able to follow the instruction. For example, they're taking a mulberry extract for 2 days. One day they take it with a rice, 50 grams of rice. Another day they take it with exactly the same rice that we provide to them. One day with supplement, one day without supplement. And with that, they're able to compare the difference and see if that works for them. And then they repeat again the same experiment so that they can confirm their N of 1 data, so they can already get the understanding of individualized effect. And what we see from that experiment is, for example, for this mulberry extract, we recruited 50 people. But what is super interesting is that for me, when I eat rice, my blood sugar spike like this and I crash. I feel super tired after eating rice. My husband took the same thing. He barely spiked. His blood sugar is like almost stable, and we're eating exactly the same thing. So the mulberry extract doesn't really show the effect because, first of all, he doesn't even spike with the rice. So those are the kind of individualization that we start seeing. And that's pretty interesting to really tell people, don't follow blindly calorie counting, carb countings. Your body is unique. So first of all, try to understand how your body reacts to food and understand your baseline. What is your condition today? And so that's where we help people. We give people a way to understand what is their body today, how they're reacting to different foods. And after a month, we're able to give them a report on this is how you react to certain types of food, certain types of carbs. And they have a better understanding how they would optimize their health going forward.
So that's fascinating. So how do you make sure that you don't cross that regulatory, or you get into regulatory issues and things like that? So I guess it'd be Boo, because you're so deeply involved in this.
Yeah, so there's a fine line between wellness device or wellness tools and diagnosis. So the moment that you're not going to the diagnosis route, and if you're just doing, for example, the continuous glucose monitor can be used to know if you may need to go to the doctor to test for diabetes. So it's a pre-screening tool. It can be used as pre-screening tool to understand your baseline levels, but you can never make a claim that it's a diagnosis, and it's used to treat any disease. And that comes in all the disclaimer. So that's where the big market is, that the less regulated market are all these wellness device, wellness test kits that allow people to get the first knowledge of what could be the problem, or pin down the problem, because it's so expensive to do that in hospital. If you ever know that the test exists, first of all. And so that's where we come in. We are able to negotiate with all these suppliers of device, test kits, as well as food and supplement. And we're able to get those people tools, just try it out. And, after that, if you wanted to go further, then go to your medicine. That's when, the medical industry takes over. And yeah, so the wellness versus the diagnosis tool is where that's the big difference between regulations.
Right, and then because you're, it sounds like the community is willing to give up data to you, and so they would have to agree to that, right? Because of
Yes.
data privacy issues and so on, and then that makes it suitable for additional analysis using some kind of machine learning AI of some sort. Is that part of your plan?
Yeah, so the AI component would be integrated. So I mean, today you can already use ChatGPT to make meal recommendation based on your dietary restriction or preference. Everyone's doing that. A lot of people are building those tools, but those information are based on internet data, which is full of noises. And where we come in is we collect the real data, getting people knowing exactly what people are eating. That's the key. Dietary study is so expensive to conduct because it's difficult to control. And you can come and ask people, survey people 1 week later, even 1 day later, and people don't remember exactly when they eat it, what they ate. And food logging, it's really hard for people to log food every meal. So we come in and because we're able to source these products that we know what's inside, what products, what ingredients are inside, we're able to know exactly the quantity, the quality of food they eat, the nutrition they eat. And we take all of these wearable data. So now it's continuous glucose monitor, in the future, blood pressure tracking, all these time series data of blood pressure, hormones, and many other biomarkers. So all of this data comes in, and of course, that will be used to feed into a personalized recommendation. Because now we know every body is unique, mind's preference and your own body is unique, that you cannot give like a one size fit all recommendation to everyone. So coming back from that basis, we can fine tune the recommendation per individual using AI, using machine learning, and bring forward what AI capability today to really go more towards the accurate, more precise recommendation per individual.
Stephen, I don't know if I could add something here.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so what Bude is doing with Tastermonial, I find is so important, and in our medical and wellness society, this is where it's lacking, is personalized information. Because right now, I have a very good friends that actually go through cancer, and pretty much the modern doctors say it is a last stage cancer. So the only option right now, you in Canada as well, this is what the medical world in Canada work with the patient with late stage cancer. They only prescribe either chemotherapy or radiation or this very invasive kind of treatment. So then my friend body, it just deteriorate and can't receive this kind of medication anymore. So she say she can't do it. But then the alternative is totally outside the formal medical area. So the doctor actually pretty much almost stopped treating her because the doctor doesn't know and doesn't have a good recommendation to give her. So it's pretty much she is left to be on her own and explore the alternative treatment on her own. And she pretty much willing to try everything, but it become individual trial and error, and no information to back her up. Whatever she eat, whatever she takes, she actually don't know. And she cannot really just go back and ask the doctor to scan because she already out of the doctor recommendation. So when she doesn't follow the recommendation from the doctor, almost the treatment stopped. So she just go blind, trying things by herself. So I just that is one of the things that I'm so motivated to help testimonials. So I hope that people in this critical situation would have better access to the information in the later on.
Yeah, and again, you have to be so careful, right? Because you don't want it, you want to make sure you don't cross regulatory guidelines. You don't. You're very much aligned with the medical profession. You support what they do. I mean, they're the primary line. You have to honor and respect the advice and what they do. But you may be to help on the wellness side. That's data driven, right? So backed by data and things like that. And ensuring, of course, that you again stay legal and follow within all the regulatory areas that are there, so because this area could be controversial too, right? So
it is very controversial. Nutrition and health
right.
is very controversial.
Okay, so Sara, I mean, your interest is on the finance side as well. I mean, you want to support wellness, you want to support it in a scientific way. You're both of you have deep science backgrounds. You both have deep engineering backgrounds, so you're definitely motivated by science and by data, and making sure the data supports what you're doing. On the finance side, and again, there's a lot of regulation on finance, right?
Yes.
And so you got it. So I just, I want to ensure that you follow all the regulatory rules for because you're going to talk on the finance side of this company. So what's your perspective on the finance side of this company and the financial models for making this sustainable and things like that? And whatever is allowed for you to talk about on the investment side. Again, be mindful of the regulations of what you can say and cannot say, right? So
for the testimonial, right?
Yeah.
Well, for the testimonial so far, would actually know day-to-day finance better. So I know that from my perspective, from what she is trying to do, is she trying to get the community of the client, the end user, the community of the tester to be bigger, so that she can also those subscription model would feed into finance revenue, into testimonial revenue. But in the same time, later on, once the community group become bigger, then she can also work with the brand. So the brand would say, okay, here testimonial would have the information that the brand can use to develop the better product for the community. So the brand will come later. And then at that point, then testimonial can accelerate the revenue faster. However, because the company is as young as testimonial, they still, like, whatever they earn, they would spend to sustain the company. So this is why it is important for a company like Testimonial to get the outside investment from the outside investor, so that they can use that extra money to scale and to create a product and improve the product that would be good for their future vision and mission. So this is what I see from the bird's eye view of what is going on with testimonial at this point. But if it's the detail and day-to-day, Bude will know better.
Right. Anything you want to add there, Bude?
That's totally correct. Sara hit the point that we are now focusing on building the consumer side first, or the community, because that's where we see a huge growth. And now we don't need to go pitch to the brands or the manufacturers anymore. I mean, we do pilot tests with them, or pilot research project with them from time to time. But it does take much more effort because our system is not fully automated. And to get system fully automated, we need to put full-time engineer to finalize those built, so that we don't need to write our own report, do not need to pull our own data. Everything is self-service, like all these research software like Qualtrics. And to get there, we're not there. So right now, focusing on consumer is where we see as a huge low-hanging fruit. And it does attract a lot of the manufacturer side to come to us. So that's going to be something we focus on the next 18 months. and to quickly accelerate the data collection, the testing of different products. So once you have all those data, it's going to be super easy to work with the manufacturers.
Okay, so we'll switch directions now. So we talked about inflection points in both of your lives. You both come from really science-oriented families, and both of you then pursued science in your backgrounds, and then you also both got into working in the financial side of the industry or the business side of the industry as well, so that you can combine the science with the business side. And then both of you are motivated on wellness, so you got into the Tastermonial and supporting this wellness company, which is very science and data driven, but being careful to make sure that you're following any kind of regulatory, staying on the positive side, so you don't get into regulatory challenges or issues. So you're mindful of that. Okay, so that's an amazing journey what you're doing. And so let's talk about the global marketplace now, and more general. In the healthcare or in the wellness area, what are the big trends that you see that people should be aware of? So not just no longer talking about Tastermonial, but just in general. What are the things that you think the audience needs to pay attention to? Trends, it could be on technology, it could be on some shifts that are occurring, etc. And then I'll go to you first, Sara, and then I'll go to Bude.
So I think a lot of people already aware of what has been going on from the past 100 years to this point, or more than 100 years, from agriculture, from hunter-gatherer, agriculture-based, industrialized, right? And then now we more like personalized in everything, and including health and food as well. And I think for longest time, we use the model of industrialized era for everything from education to health. So the doctor knowledge from the industrial era is pretty much there's this standard, there's this statistic, and we're going to apply this statistic to everybody. And of course, because of its statistic, is going to work for most cases because it's average. But then for certain and many cases that is required individual, it doesn't work. So that's why I think we see some medicine that work for many doesn't work for some. And I think this is where the personalized going to be the theme going forward. Like for personalized food, personalized medicine, like Bude was saying, that she eats certain food, her blood sugar spike, her husband doesn't. My husband have the same problem. We eat the same thing. I don't gain weight and he's gain weight. So, and I see more and more evidence that we have to look at all these health and wellness on the personalized lens. And me being an investor, I have to look for a new trend and a new thing all the time. And I find that the precision medicine and personalized diet would be one of a really big theme, because we have gone through digital based. We've gone through something that more outside our life, like digital material thing. And now going forward, I think it's going to be something to do with internalized, personal internalized, from food to the thing that we like to work with, to play with. Everything is going to be personalized concept and area. And food is something that we eat and it's become us. It's very important, even in the health, in the medicine itself. Personalized gene editing and all this, to use this kind of technique to treat patient and to treat ourselves is the big thing right now. So that's what I see the trend going, personalized in all area that we're going to be touching in the future.
Okay, so Sara, let me summarize what you're saying then, and this is my understanding. You're saying that personalized, that is individual to that person, which is different from another person, and a precise way of dealing with them. So personalized precision science directly to them, or solutions, is the trend that you're seeing. And you're seeing this in agriculture as well. Precision, personalized agriculture or farming, precision, personalized healthcare or wellness. And you indicated that part of that could be the genomic, sort of the gene heritage that a particular individual has. That could be, and this could apply to animal care as well, right? So precision and personalized, it affect the food, the environment, their gene heritage. All of these are involve a lot of data and analytics, and thereby you can have a much higher and better outcome. So I also see that as a trend. In fact, I'm speaking on it this week. I'm speaking on AI and climate and AI and food. And part of my message is personalized and precision. And I give examples of startups and so on, and that's a big trend. Did I capture what you were mentioning there?
Yes, you do. You do.
Okay, Bude, any other trends that you see that people need to pay attention to? And maybe even it's outside of food, or it could be different kinds of science that are out that you think are interesting?
Yeah, so I'll elaborate a little bit further on what Sara talked about, which is exactly what I would probably say initially as well, is personalized medicine, personalized nutrition is the way to go. What I see as the barrier today, but would change in the coming years, is the cost, the affordability and accessibility to those tools. Because today, gene editing is like $10,000 to do like complete genome mapping of your body. It's really expensive to do all these tests, to have access to all of these. But what I see as a trend is there's going to be new players, devices that allow you to test and track those information and have access to those tests more affordably. So that's where we see as a trend that goes globally. So when people have access to these tools early on, then of course the healthcare costs would come down. And what we already see today, there's a lot of patients that have infertility today in infertility clinic. Most of the traditional infertility clinic would recommend people to do IVF immediately, which is very expensive. So only people who can afford it or live in, countries that can pay for those, for them to go and do those treatments. But what we see, more and more people are informed, and they realize that, okay, I may have hormonal issue linked to symptoms called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is literally just blood sugar dysregulation or insulin resistance. And all they need to do is to manage better their diet, control some hormones, which is like much cheaper than going down the route of IVF. And that has been proven so many times by so many of these functional medicine doctors that are able to help people, all these women get pregnant without going down the route of, paying for the IVF treatment. And that's where we see more and more people are more aware themselves, and they will take control in their own hands to get better and seek information themselves outside of the traditional way of treatment.
So, Bude, what you're talking about is looking at the broader landscape of different techniques that can be employed to give you more insight. And then, of course, it's always under the medical system, doctor's care, and so on. So, but these additional insights just give you more options, I guess, that you can analyze. I guess the problem then is, how do you sort out what's good and what's not? And there's so much false information out there, fake information. You could use artificial intelligence perhaps to help do that, but AI also generates fake news and so on. So that's a problem. How do you sort out how do you sort out the noise from the things that are real? Do you have any sort of recommendations on that? I mean, there's like famous journals like the journal Nature and others, where you get perhaps more reliable information, or famous medical journals where you can get more reliable information. I sometimes tell my audience that the ACM, or a science organization, you get there's some curation occurring with ACM. IEEE is another. There's some curation occurring, but there's still controversy sometimes. You can get opposing views and things like that in these different science organizations. Do you have sort of any recommendations to try to get good information from controversial information, or
Yeah, so
fake
you
news kind of
can,
information?
yeah, so for example, if you wanted to really dig deeper into certain nutrition research, health research, of course, like journals like PLOS, Nature, those are, the to-go sources. But then you might want to look at the sample size of those trials.
That's true.
And that's where you will see a lot of big gaps between, normal biomedical trials versus nutrition trials, dietary trials, which is like super small sample size.
That's true.
And that's where I see as an opportunity to optimize is get more data into each trial. So those, they have more statistical power than what we rely on today, because even though we go and read the PLOS, the PLOS journal, we trust them, but because the data is so small and we know everyone is different, like every individuals are different, in the end of the day, it's, we're analyzing, available data. And I think that's a key problem. It's the input. It's not the output. It's not the, interpretation needs to be done by experts. But before getting to that, step, the input is lacking. And I think that's the key, is to get the right input and get more of people, participating in these trials. But it's expensive today to do the trials, just because all the logistics of getting people to participate in, some of these trials.
That's interesting. And in some ways, the tools are out there, right? Because of the internet and the level of engagement that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
The population of the Earth, it's over 4 billion now. I would say maybe 60% are connected on the internet now, or at least this year, I would say about 60%. There's also these communities that are out there, and of course, you have to find the right ones, which are trusted and safe.
Yes.
I guess the other thing too is I'd be curious to see what your views are of things like quantum computing and quantum information science and technology, or quantum biology, or supercomputing, or biomedical innovation, some of the things that are happening with novel nanoparticle research, or generative AI, what they call foundation models, of which generative AI and ChatGPT kind of tech, or Bard from Google and so on, or Palm 2, I guess, is the foundation model, or Llama from Meta, but that's all gone into open source now with Alpaca and Vicuna, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you see all of that, and what do you think is promising? Do any of those areas interest you, or are you following some of that? And so I'll get comments from you first, Bude, and then Sara.
Yeah, so I see a big contribution of generative AI to, make some applications that can really change the world and improve lives. What I see in our context of health and nutrition is already that the generative AI helps to, it's based on the large language model, and it pulls in different types or different formats of information. So the way that we capture inputs today is not ideal. So in our context of running research, dietary research, most of the university dietary research based on surveys, and people don't remember, or people don't want to tell the truth because they don't want to, say that they're not eating well, or, people lie, or people just don't remember. And so what we see as a huge opportunity is to capture all of those other format, like voice, for example, visuals, to extract information like emotions, how people are feeling, right? Because in the end of the day, we collect all these health data, blood sugar, blood pressure, hormones, but then we need to map them with the feelings. And to capture those things, instead of asking people, oh, report me 10-minute survey of how you feel, they just capture it through talking to certain mediums, like, okay, it can be phone, can be, you know, some other kind of device that capture the voice. And with that information, it would be much easier, faster to crowdsource all this data, health data, by just subtly taking other format of it and extract the truth out of it. So that's where I see as an opportunity, is to crowdsource more data, make it super user-friendly by allowing people to interact and engage with the system in a more subtle way. So that's one thing that I see. Yeah, so that's one key point that I see can really bring forward the improvement in our lives.
So let me reflect on what you're saying. Generative AI. So just for the audience sake, there's this kind of big classification of AI, under which is machine learning. And under machine learning, you have deep learning. And under deep learning, you have foundation models. And foundation models are like large language models, fusion models, which are used in imaging and so on. And examples of those would be things like GPT-4, which is multimodal. Multimodal meaning it's trained on text, or it can take text and images. And there's this expansion of multimodal, which will go into text, images, and video. And of course, you mentioned sound, but sound can be converted into text.
Yeah.
Though with sound, if you could directly analyze, you can get intonation, which could give you all sorts of maybe additional behavioral points. So there's a lot of untapped data beyond text and image, especially in video, because you can see sort of the temporal and spatial relationships. You can see or do analysis of behavioral kind of feedback and try to map that and so on, and with sound as well. And then what you're saying is that these generative models like GPT-4, which will become at some point GPT-5 or GPT-X, will be multimodal and many dimensions. So it'll give you a lot more capability. And in that way, this crowdsourcing idea will give you much more data that you can use to do this kind of analysis and get a much deeper insights. Did I capture or summarize what you were saying?
I think the beauty of it is really it already exists. You can already do like, you know, like speech to text, all of these in the past, but it's all disparate. There's no translation. So what LLM or large language model does is everything is translated into one language, which is the NLP, the text format. So whatever format you take, videos or speech, it all boils down to the speech. So now you can have a better power in training the model in one language and not training in so different language. And we've done a lot of tests, you know, machine learning model. In the past, we tried to solve a basic problem with NLP, and now running it on ChatGPT, I'm like, wow, like 80% accuracy. What we have tried 60% in the past with all these synonyms, you know, like trying to solve, like finding synonyms of different ingredients. And nowadays it's like, wow, like it's just because it has such a big data base already that we tap into that power of, you know, putting everything in the same place and just converting everything and just, you know, like hone in and have the same format.
Yeah, and I guess what you're talking about too is when you do these testing on these models, like using the massive multitask language understanding, I guess the average human on this test across 57 different tasks in almost all domains, I think humans average about 43%, experts about 89 to 90%.
Yeah.
GPT-4, I think it's about 86%, but I encourage the audience to look. But if you, excuse me, use this idea of chain of thought combined with reflection, combined with this sort of self-conceptualization, or I term it like selection, where the model actually, you get the model to look at multiple answers and kind of select which one is the best one. And then there's this new paper out on tree of thought, which even gives you better results. And this is just by prompt engineering, you can get tremendous results. So it's a pretty exciting time. So we focused on foundation models. Sara, do you want to add anything on some of the other topics I talked about? Quantum computing, quantum biology, supercomputing, biomedical innovation, etc.
So on this area, it wasn't really my background expertise, but I have a lot of interest in quantum physics. And I still myself have a question as well, like how the computing, no, how quantum computing work based on quantum physics. I myself have questions. I'm fascinated in all these areas, but I don't have an expertise to give a meaningful input at this point, because my area is more into energy and psychology pretty much. So with I know that in energy we are transforming from internal combustion to electric, like everybody knows. So nuclear going to play a big part in this. So this part I can understand, and I can voice my thought and my opinion. But the area that you were just asking, I'm not sure. But one thing that you were asking about in the future, where are we seeing the trend? The other one that I did not mention that I see is the virtual, like virtual world, virtual life, virtual everything. And I think this is also going to be one of the huge area. The very easy reason that I'm pretty sure of this is by looking at the new generation. So my children are in alpha generation now, me and Bude, right? So generation Z done, and then now generation alpha is from 2010 and younger. So my kids, they are fell into this area, and I can see that they are very fluent in digital world, in virtual world. The language that they use, I already don't understand. Like my daughter would be like, "Oh, I need Robux money to buy my skin, to buy skin." I don't know what is skin. So all this is their language. All this will be coming. We are going to be living in their world. So this is the other area that I kind of keep close eye on as an investor, because this is going to be the area that the new generation going to be live in. So this is one of the area that I think we may have to keep eye on.
So Sara, let me reflect on what you're talking about, and I should remind the audience these questions that Sara and Bude have not seen them before. These are unscripted interviews, and then I'm just reacting in real time to what our guest experts are saying here. So Sara, you do have this deep background. You got a PhD in nuclear engineering, basically, right? It's chemical engineering but applied to nuclear industry. Yes. So. And you worked on computational fluid dynamics, because that's involved with nuclear engineering. So yes, there's the computational side. But on the nuclear side, from a future trend, so this is still a future trend, right? So we're talking about the future. Is there's these small modular reactors that are getting much more popular, especially because of greenhouse gases and this UN sort of indication that we're going to exceed 1.5 degrees now in the next few years, at least at some periods in time, and that's quite concerning. There's the Hiroshima action recommendations that came out of the G7, one of which is around climate and what to do about climate. So energy is a big part of that, renewable energy, solar, wind, those kinds of tidal power, nuclear. So on the nuclear side, small modular reactors. There's also liquid salt nuclear reactors, like TerraPower, I believe, is using that and considered safer. Fusion reactors, we got the first instance, more energy out than in. And there's quite a few startups working in fusion, and some are saying that we'll have something commercializable even within the next few years, right? So on the nuclear side, that's your expertise. There's a lot going on in energy, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
Electric vehicles and energy storage and
Yes.
And so on. So that's me reflecting on your comments. And then you indicated you're talking about alpha generation, and I use the 2010. I often use the definition 2012 as alpha generation, and 1997 as Generation Z, right? So, but this alpha generation, whether it's 2010 or 2012, are internet natives. They're augmented reality, mixed reality natives, right? Which means they just feel really comfortable.
Yes.
And so what you're talking about is the digitization and digital replicas of everything we see here around us, but in the virtual world or virtualized. And that gives a lot of advantages. And in fact, your original, now you're Canadian citizens or American citizens, or you reside in North America, but in your native homeland, you have something called the Translucia metaverse, which was released this year, and also the Adelius metaverse, which are really based on this sort of idea of digitization of physical assets and then having enhancements because you can virtualize it. And that has a lot of interesting outcomes, right? Apple making their announcement this year, probably a new kind of augmented reality device that's quite expensive. It's said, we won't know, but maybe quite functional. And there's these ideas of being able to virtualize on contact lenses, let's say, with or glasses, so something that's even not as obvious, or this idea that you can take fMRIs, or you can do maybe near infrared imaging of the brain and its waves, and just by your thought patterns, you can use some kind of foundation model to convert that into actual language, right? So what are the implications of that? And so I just want to reflect on what you're saying. So I hope I captured some of the areas that you have expertise in, and wanted to give the audience some additional context. Did I miss anything?
No, you are above and beyond. Yes.
Okay, so we're over an hour. So this is our last question, and that is anything else that you want to comment on? And then finally, your final recommendation. So we'll go back to Bude.
Yeah, I think if we're going back to the topic of AI in general, it's very fascinating technology. Worlds are moving much faster. One thing to keep in mind is, how do we deal with this new technology? How do we train our brains to process and to work with this new technology in a way that we don't become all dumb one day, and outsourcing all the thinking to them? Like, how can we leverage them so we can become smarter instead of becoming dumber? And one key thing that I already realized even before the time of AI is, with the cell phone and smartphone and all that, you don't remember phone number anymore, so you forget. you outsource everything. So how do we live with this new technology in a way that like the information that comes from them can help us think more, further, and smarter, and not relying on them as a truth? And that's my key, like takeaway, or something I want people to think is, this new technology, very interesting, but it's also something that we need to live with, and we need to figure that out as a community.
So let me reflect on what you're saying. I mean, you have the taxi cab drivers in London who actually have a more evolved form of parts of their brain, because they have to internalize the street maps of London, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it enhanced their capabilities, or of civilizations past, this idea of elders passing through storytelling, huge narratives, and they kept this to memory. Or us, or myself, I used to use a slide rule, but a lot of the calculation you did in your head. And I think, Bude, what you're saying is what are the implications as we rely on all of this augmentation? Will we lose some of our innate capabilities, and what will that do to us as people, and maybe to our brains, perhaps, right? So yeah, it's an interesting area. And what does it mean for the evolution of humans, right? Did I miss anything, or did I get something wrong in the interpretation of what you're saying?
No, that's a clear interpretation, but interpretation in our life and our happiness and our health, it's very important, because a lot of things we decide today is based on our gut feeling. And are we going to lose that gut feeling? That's just, that's my point. Like, are we relying on a machine instead of our gut feeling in the future and make the wrong decision? So that's more the point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's truly an inflection point. So that term is said all the time. This is an inflection point. This is a major turning point. But really, this is a major turning point. And people are equating to like electricity or something really foundational. Maybe the printing press, and this generative foundation AI is just having such a implication to how we are going to continue, right? So it's really fascinating. And in those areas that we thought AI couldn't handle, like creativity, we always used to say, well, you don't have to worry because it can't be creative, or it can't generate novel thought or do novel science or whatever. Anyways, or make music or art.
Yeah.
It does all of those things. So, okay, Sara, your final thoughts and recommendations.
Yeah, the world's moving very fast, very fascinating. But I think through my experience now, I think I've been human thinking, human doing, and now I'm at the state of trying to be human being. So get back to my internal self, be mindful, have awareness. So I can do all these things using all this technology and get excited about what's to come. But in the same time, I have to always have time to come back and practice my awareness, practice my mindfulness, so that I stay human being and stay joy and peace in all things that happen and moving very fast. And I think what I can leave with the audience is, in the end, don't forget to be a human being and come back to our internal self amidst of all these things that happen.
Sara, really interesting points that you make, this idea of mindfulness, which then speaks to things like meditation and things that are in the cultures of India and parts of Asia. And even this idea of a happiness set point there used to be this thinking that you couldn't change it. You're born with some kind of happiness set point. And then they found these monks, just through training, could actually change their happiness set point. So this mindfulness and being human and reflecting back and being to who we are, I think it's interesting. And so we don't lose our humanity, I guess, right? So
yes,
I think that's those are the areas that you're talking about. And you practice meditation. So these are reflections and recommendations you're giving from personal experience.
Yes.
So we're well over an hour, and so we got into a lot of different kinds of discussions, some of it in terms of what motivated you in your journey and the foundation of science for both of you. Both of you are very talented, and yet you were able to convert that and translate that talent into something called Tastermonial, where it's a data-driven community of wellness. And then we both reflect, or all of us reflected on, what does the future entail? And what does that look like? And I think one of the main areas that you both mentioned is, making sure we don't lose our humanity, and the other, and all the aspects of what that means, and then the implications of all of the science that's happening, and particularly generative AI, which is part of what we call foundation models of AI, right? So, you both are just supremely talented, resourceful. So thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with our audience.
Thank you,
Thank
Stephen.
you, Stephen.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.